good news for democracy, good news for good governance. And it is important for all of us to understand that this should be a test case for any other election that will follow. South Africa is a very big economy, in fact the biggest economy in Africa and the wealthiest on the African continent. It is important for all of us to learn from South Africa. Before the elections, there had been so many predictions that for the first time the ANC would lose its majority in parliament. And I think all these predictions have come to pass, and those behind them have been vindicated. It is important for us to understand that the governance by ANC continues to depreciate in terms of economic management, in terms of national unity, in terms of peace, national security. So ANC should learn from this. And what I love about South African democracy, particularly these elections, is that the elections have been largely peaceful, largely credible, largely transparent. And the president himself has learned a lesson, incumbency advantages, those that are being used largely in other parts of Africa to defraud the people, to subvert the will of the people. He had that opportunity, but he hasn't done that, and he's urging unity. I want to believe that at the end of the day, South Africa will enjoy a unity government. For us, we are speaking, I think he has commissioned a committee to look into the possibility of radical and
Good morning once again to you and to my co-panelists, and equally importantly to our cherished viewers out there and listeners. There are a number of issues that immediately come to mind, and from a political standpoint, and that is actually if you add Malema, you add Zuma to ANC, all of whom gave birth to those two, ANC giving birth to, they would have had about over 60% or 60% of the vote. So ANC's inability to keep the family together is keeping your family together. A butterfly comes to mind when I think about Ghana. So when you start fragmenting your power base, and it's happened to us even in NDC in the past, or people begin, you immediately suffer some loss for it. And that is where the MPPs currently, we in the past have been there with people leaving our party. We've been able to reconcile with most of them. And that is where the ANC must really begin to have some talks. They are compelled to now because they don't have them. No. But they must have some talks with their brothers and sisters who have left and give them some level of power. This could have been done without getting them through an election in this manner. But now they are compelled to because of the position they find themselves. If not, they go back to the post. There's no way of putting it together. South Africa is, all the parties involved are unlikely to go with the party that is predominantly from the white background, if I can use that term, forgive me. But they did very well. I think they placed second in this race, with Zuma coming third and Malema coming fourth. So people are now, what is interesting, and this is what I keep telling our people here, you see, no matter how you look at things, one of the biggest deciding factors in elections is always the economy, how people feel. And over the years, people feel that their cost standard of living, the way they have been, the kind of wealth they have and how it's being distributed, equally they feel that the ANC has not been able to manage them into further prosperity. So people are now looking at their pockets and the way to vote. So what was unthinkable maybe 10 years ago with regard to the political party that has certain, and I use it, white dominance, has now changed. And all of a sudden they are being seen as South Africa and not necessarily white. Or yeah, exactly. So interesting times ahead for South Africa and how they're going to be able to run. But ANC, as a political party, with the dominance they had, even though at some point was going to have a split, some of us feel that it's come a bit earlier than expected. And there's also another aspect of it. Zuma's power base, notwithstanding everything that has happened to him, was clearly his people saying, and I believe he's from the Zulu enclave. Yes. We're just saying that we are not having this. You can't do this to our man. We're not happy with the person who is even your leader, Ramaphosa. For him to be arrested, tried, and charged, whether it's right or wrong, and they just voted en masse for their man Zuma. So now that it's over, you have to sit down with him at the table, whether you like it or not, and meet him on some of his terms and conditions. I was more concerned about a particular gentleman who was speaking, and that should also draw the attention of us here in Ghana, where he was talking about foreigners working in South Africa, and the fact that there should be, in inverted commas, some form of purge, and they should be sent out the country. Now, I can't remember the gentleman who was. It's not one of the leaders, but he was speaking as a spokesperson for one of the parties who has now got some percentage at the lower end. And that is of concern, especially in the recent past, where there has been attacks on especially Ghanaians in South Africa. So everybody should be very alive to that space and watch it and see how he was saying that they are interested in home affairs in terms of ministries or agencies that have to work. And they want to make sure that somebody is in charge of police, somebody is in charge of home affairs, so they can deal properly with foreigners. I'm not saying that illegals should be allowed to necessarily stay in any country, but making sure you define what is an illegal and not an illegal is very clear. And it should be done if it ever gets to that stage, in a very humanitarian fashion. The history of this type of behavior in South Africa, including towards Ghanaians and Nigerians, has not been the best. So I flag that as something we should watch closely. Thank you.
Register.
Yeah, bro. Long time.
Yes.
My regards to everybody watching, and particularly a friend who is naming her son, actually, Natoshi. Anyway, all the best.
The Natoshi we know? Or
no, not the Natoshi.
Okay.
No, it's not. No, it's not my son. She's a nurse friend of mine who actually was taking care of mine. Yeah, I think that, you see, South Africa had metamorphosed from apartheid into Nelson Mandela coming out with just one agenda, uniting a country that was sharply divided. So he set himself an agenda to unite a country that was divided. Once he was able to fairly achieve that, he left the scene. Because his agenda was not for an economic development of South Africa, and so he could not have been measured on how economically South Africa was developed. He was like, look, we are divided, we are fighting amongst ourselves. I come in as a person who is bridging that. And that was fairly achieved. So you realize that he tried to form a government of unity, bringing in the white into the presidency. And at some point, they had some disagreement, so the second vice president would have to resign and all of that. But that was achieved. Thereafter, South Africans were looking for prosperity. After Mandela, the black majority were looking at opportunities to break into the upper echelon of the South African economy. And that is what ANC had not been able to do. They still see the white as controlling the economy, even though they are in their minority. And they don't see the leaders from, even though the blacks have ruled South Africa since apartheid, they've not been able to see that there is an effort at empowering the black, and that politicians are rather enjoying and making life comfortable for themselves. And that is why somebody like Julius Malema is surviving, because now it's like, well, I speak for the poor majority who believe that they are not getting what they are supposed to get. And because they've not been able to empower the black minority, and they live in that phobia that jobs that could be available to them as blacks, some other Africans come there and they take those jobs. So you need to have a government that will do a whole lot of rethink as to how do we cluster the South African society such that we have people who you cannot do anything about. You cannot give them any skill at all, who have made crime and violence their trade. How do we deal with such? How do we try to put in place measures and policies that will reform them, get them to start thinking a bit right, but at the same time try to economically empower them? How do we improve education for the black South Africans so that they are able to gain skills? Probably South Africa has a very good relationship with China and Russia. I know they're not too good with the Americans, but how do we develop partnership along business lines so that black South Africans who may not have the economic power to set up their own businesses would build business relationship for which technology and skills will later be transferred based on how the policy is developed. So you start building some level of economic skills for native black South Africans. You see, once government policy is not addressing these needs, particularly economic needs, and not solving the problem of crime, which is also making South Africa less attractive in terms of foreign direct investment, you have ANC becoming unpopular every day, because then it's not being able to meet the aspiration of the people. Black South Africans generally thought that after apartheid, they are now going to be in charge, and so economically, with all the resources that they have in South Africa, they were going to now have some of their system. South Africa is not closing its economy to external activities like China was able to do, because they don't even have the muscles to be able to close the economy and say we want to build our economy before we open up to the external world. So, to me, ANC will continue to be unpopular. It will continue to disintegrate until they are able to fashion out something that is able to bring everybody on board, and everybody finding space within the economy of South Africa. Because some of the richest people in Africa are coming from South Africa. But how come they are unable to extend those economic fortunes into investment?
You mentioned a fundamental point. They have not been successful because they haven't been prioritized. You know, when Uncle mentions the misbehavior of our brothers and sisters in South Africa, I mean the indigenous black South Africans, these are people, if you analyze them very well, they are not different from our brothers and sisters in America, the black Americans. These are people who are, one, unskilled, two, lazy, with all due respect. They don't want to work, and three, envious. They don't want to work, and they don't want other Africans from other countries to work. So that is the problem. So I want to add to your point that as part of black empowerment, there should be the need for them to be educated, because they need a mental change. But if they are left in their present state of mentality, no matter how they are empowered, they can't do anything. So, thank you.
No, yeah, please go ahead, proceed.
Clarify his statement he's made. He's not wrong, first point. But you have to also now do the split of a people who want equal terms of pay rather than an exploitative payment scheme. And even in Europe, when that happens, and for example, the Eastern Europeans had issues and they came to London or the
Interesting story.
or CID. But did you hear the body that
So this is
it was by the drug?
yeah.
And I'm confused.
It says the State Anti-Drug Agency.
Yes.
So former President Edgar Lungu said the family would challenge the charges in court. The former leader has been accusing the government of victimizing him and members of his historic Patriotic Front PF party to block his return to politics ahead of 2026 elections. But if you have not been able to explain to the state how you acquired $1.5 million to purchase...
But that is in somebody's cupboard here.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But you see, that person must be audited.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That you are able to acquire these luxuries. And
Dr. Mazuk wants to make a quick point. I think Uncle Alex also wants to. So let me start with you.
I think it is partly attitude now. If you want, you can call it cultural. It's our mentality, even our attitude towards banking in this country. You know, Cecilia, that's the name, right?
Yes.
She's not the first person to have done that in this country. Go back to the era of Samoa money under the bed, and we are growing. Look, when Samoa did that, which was an outcry, nothing happened to him. There was nobody to even investigate him. I think we are growing. From then, now Cecilia Bepa has done that, and we have. What's the name of that? Special prosecutor. Is it special prosecutor?
Special prosecutor.
Office of Special. At least he has gone into it. But you see, our growth, with all humility, is gearing towards negativity. Because this Office of Special Prosecutor should have been, first, positively intentioned, well-empowered, actively involved in justice, in prosecuting people in the interest of the state, not in the interest of any political party. Should have been more patriotic than partisan. And you know, so at the end of the day, it's part of the
court says he has no powers. His powers are not sufficient. So I had to go back to Ioko.
So you go to Ioko, and all I'm trying to say is that even though we have intended to fight it, the structures put in place to do the fight are almost dysfunctional.
yeah,
So our attitude here should, we should have a change of attitude towards banking, towards money, towards business management, and we should even be educated very well on money laundering. Maybe people are doing things that amount to money laundering without knowing that what they are doing amounts to money laundering. So let's come back to our institutions and our mentality. Cecilia Dapa, look at the controversy her action raised, but she's still a free person, right? Obeda Samoa did that and went scot-free. No one even arrested him. No one did anything. No one invited him. So it is the behavior of the politicians backed by the ordinary citizens. So it is a collective mind change that we need in this situation. Okay.
At the time, it was a big issue.
It was a big issue, but nothing happened to him.
Oh, no, he
wasn't invited. Not on record. No. Nothing happened to him.
Yeah,
so
right.
yes.
you see, I wanted to say something
the Gen Z, right? The Gen Z.
Gen Z, yeah.
The Gen Z, this generation. Most of them didn't even know that it happened some time ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you see, my issue about special prosecutor is that, you see, until we carve out completely the Attorney General's Department from the Ministry of Justice, we would not be able to address some of these things.
Last week
part of the power of the special prosecutor was carved out of the Attorney General, even though he's been given some security of tenure and all of that. But because
he's still subject to the Attorney General.
The Attorney General. Ioko and all of them are all subject to the Attorney General because they do not have prosecutorial powers. They may only investigate. and it's the Attorney General that is supposed to prosecute. So, probably what we need to do as a country is to completely decouple the Attorney General from the office.
All right.
And then give the Attorney General some level of independence, just like you have with the Electoral Commission, that cut across government.
Just cannot be challenged by the minister.
Yeah.
Except in certain areas where, but